Chapter 45, Donald Trump. How to win an election for $46,000. This chapter is provocative on purpose. It is the chance in the book where I have the opportunity to explain to the average person, the average reader, the average non-advertising person, how does modern marketing and advertising work? It is deeply important for us to understand that what we see in marketing and advertising on the surface, the big messages, the campaigns, what we read about in the newspapers or in business publications, is the tip of the iceberg. Most modern marketing and advertising today happens behind the scenes and happens with a shit ton of data. We hear about that a lot with Facebook, with Apple. We hear a lot about privacy. We hear a lot about Google and how people are trying to take their privacy back. Oh, I got some fucking news for you. If you're tweeting on one of these and you are sharing with all manner of different people where you are, what you're doing, who you're communicating with, we have long since given up our privacy for a number of modern conveniences. It's just what we do. We can argue about that. We can try to take back some parts of that anonymity. But as the old saying goes, Pandora's out of the box. And we need to learn to live with it rather than trying to stuff her back in, because that's not going to work. I'd like to read you an excerpt of this. This chapter got under people's skin like no other that I wrote, but it's going to be deeply important. And I think it gets under people's skin because it exposes what people maybe suspected was going on, but didn't really understand at a deep level. And I want to explain why I did that and why I walked you through step by step how it worked. Because that's that's an ethical decision. Do I do that? So I wanted to, maybe this is an attempt to explain myself a little bit, but be that as it may, here's an excerpt from chapter 45, Donald Trump. I'll admit that I worry about what I intend to tell you. Yes, for other modern marketing professionals, this is stock and trade. But modern marketers aren't most people. For most people reading this, the explanation I'm about to give might be the first time you've been exposed to this information. That realization leads me to another question. Is it ethical to teach people, especially those with ill intent, however unintentionally, the skills they need to influence something as important as a presidential election, especially when the resources needed to do so, the technology and the money, are within the reach of many people? Am I teaching people how to build a rhetorical bomb? Well, it should be obvious to you by now that I've answered yes to that question. And before we begin, I'd like to tell you why. One, although we'll dive into some amount of detail, the specifics vary widely, considering everything you'll learn here at the Digital Marketing 101 level. Instead of a quantitative tutorial on mining long-tail key phrases, you'll get a philosophical approach. It's enough for you to get the idea, but not quite enough to build your rhetorical suitcase nuke. Number two, what you're about to read isn't possible or even probable. It happened and continues to happen today. In fact, I'm not teaching you anything you couldn't learn directly from the digital media platforms themselves. They have an incentive to teach you these tools. They want you to advertise with them. And number three, I believe sunlight is the best disinfectant. If you are unaware of how you're being influenced, it is much harder for you to detect it, protect yourself, and fight back. In fact, most political campaigns, right, left, or otherwise, would rather you didn't know for precisely that reason. Well, in the end here, I bet you can tell what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to say, fuck that. You should know what's going on. You should understand how digital marketing works. I'm not saying it's good, or I'm not saying it's bad. It just is. And you need to understand it if you're going to understand anything about how modern commerce works and how modern communication works. This is a critical chapter for educating yourself and knowing how to think about it for yourself, for your family, your community, and your country in the future. So July 4th, chapter 45, Donald Trump in Marketer in Chief. Available everywhere books are sold very, very soon.